Let's talk about stabilizers now. Stabilizers are a very important part of embroidery, even though you don't see them in your finished project. They're super important. They act as a foundation for your embroidery. So they help make your stitches look nice and even, they prevent puckering, and they just make everything look really good. They give your hoop and your fabric just something to give a little extra support as you're stitching out your embroidery. If you don't use a stabilizer, what can happen is your stitches might get a little puckery and pulled. There might be some pulling lines on the fabric. Things might not line up in your design. Your design might get distorted. So basically things won't go very well if you don't use stabilizer. So you pretty much always want to use some kind of stabilizer. We're going to talk about several different categories of stabilizer. The first one is called cutaway stabilizer. So this is a good choice for fabrics that are less stable or stretchy, like for instance t-shirts or knits, things that aren't very stable on their own. The cutaway stabilizer is, so you embroider into it and then you cut away the excess, so the cutaway stabilizer stays permanently in the finished design and lends support even after you're done stitching out. So an example of when you would want to use that would be on, let's say, a cardigan, so like this sweater knit. So the sweater knit is super stretchy, but you can see that there's cutaway stabilizer that's still in there, so the design itself doesn't stretch as you stretch the fabric around it, because if it did, it would get all distorted and weird looking. So the cutaway stabilizer just keeps everything nice and stable and prevents stretching out and distortion. It's also nice to use in garments where the back of the embroidery is going to be against skin because it's a little bit softer and less irritating. The next type of stabilizer is tearaway stabilizer. So this stabilizer is kind of like paper. It has a papery texture and you can actually even tear it, just like the name implies. So tearaway stabilizer is less permanent than cutaway. This is good for fabrics that are more stable, so they're not going to really stretch or distort very much. So things like quilt weight cottons or home decor fabrics, when you embroider into it, you tear away the excess, and then whatever is left in the design eventually kind of tears away, or if you launder it, it will wash away. So it's really not for permanent support, it's just for support while embroidering. So again, stable woven fabrics is what you want to use your tearaway for. The next stabilizer is tacky stabilizer. So tacky stabilizer is actually sticky on one side. So it's a non-permanent sticky surface. This is a tearaway form of tacky stabilizer. So tacky stabilizer is great for things that are too small to fit into a hoop. So if you're trying to embroider something that's kind of tiny, like for instance this pocket, so this was too small to fit in the hoop, so this is just some tacky stabilizer hooped with the sticky side up, and then the pocket is stuck right to the stabilizer, so it's holding it nice and secure as it's being embroidered. So this is also good for things that might shift around a little as you're embroidering. If you just want your fabric to be extra still, or again, if your embroidered object is too small to fit in the hoop. The last category of stabilizers to talk about is water-soluble stabilizers. These are really fun because they dissolve completely away in water, which is kind of magical. So these are a good choice if you want both sides of your embroidery to look really good, to be pristine, because there won't be any stabilizer left in the finished project. The first type is this kind of fabric type water-soluble stabilizer, so it almost looks and feels like fabric. This would be a foundation stabilizer, so just like the others, you would put this behind your fabric and embroider through it, and it will dissolve away when you're finished. Another type of water-soluble stabilizer is the topper kind, so it's kind of like a thin film. This is not meant to be a foundation. This goes on top of fabric and you embroider over it. So this is really great if you're embroidering something with a lot of texture or plushness, like fleece or a towel. If you don't use this, your stitches can kind of sink down into the texture of the fabric. So what you would do is you would put your fabric-like stabilizer on the back and then put this down on top of your fabric, and that will help prevent your stitches from sinking down into the textured fabric. So I have here a sample stitch out of an embroidery in a piece of fleece. This could also be a towel. You would kind of do it the same way. So on the top is my topper stabilizer, so that helps prevent my stitches from sinking down in. And on the back, I've already trimmed the excess away, but this is my foundation stabilizer, so it's the fabric-like one. And I have a bowl of water here, so we're actually going to dunk it in and see how it dissolves away. So you would want to follow the manufacturer instructions for whichever stabilizer that you're using, as far as like the time goes, how long it should be in the water. But I'm just going to work this around a little bit, and you can see that it completely vanished away on both sides. So it's pretty cool. So now that we have learned about thread and stabilizers, we are ready to hoop up our fabric. So the next video we're going to talk about how to hoop up your project.